Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on in the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. Let's first look back by using keywords. The past week has been a rough one with a deadly earthquake hitting the border region of Turkey and Syria, leaving thousands of people dead, homeless, and devastated. Military parade in North Korea. Wednesday's parade was a widely expected one, but came with new weapons and a relatively new face, the leader's daughter, Chue. Next, eco-friendly. South Korea is playing a bigger role globally in becoming more eco-friendly. Efforts include doubling recycling to expanding the electric vehicle market. Into the endemic, Korea is doing well in terms of taming the number of COVID-19 cases amid much eased virus prevention rules. And K-pop stars are in the spotlight. They made some proud headlines in the global music industry, and they're also trending in fashion.
Every time if I try to sleep, I'm only hearing screaming of the people, and I don't know, every family has at least one person lost. I hope all people here can be possible to have a warm place with meal and water and
Almost a week after the heartbreaking disaster, desperation builds up and hopes are fading in the earthquake-stricken region. But coming from different backgrounds and also in different uniforms, the international community is united in assisting rescue efforts. Team Korea is also in Antakya of Hatay province in Turkey. Here's our Peunji for more.
Rescue workers pull out a survivor from the rubble of a destroyed building. The South Korean search and rescue team found a man in his mid-70s, only about an hour and a half after they began their operation. As of 8 p.m. Korea time, the team has rescued 4 more people, including a 2-year-old girl and her 40-year-old father, as well as a 35-year-old woman and a 10-year-old girl. South Korean local media outlets initially reported that the woman was the 2-year-old's mother, but Seoul's foreign ministry later clarified that this was not the case. The ministry also added that other than minor injuries, all of those that were rescued are in good health.
South Korea's foreign ministry will continue to support the Korea disaster relief team and make sure that the government can effectively provide assistance to Turkey.
Upon Turkey's request, the South Korean team has been in Turkey's southeastern region of Antakya since 5 a.m. Thursday local time. An official from the foreign ministry explained that Antakya is one of the areas hit hardest. Extreme cold weather and the scale of the damage have been making search and rescue operations extremely difficult. The 118-member rescue team left Seoul on Tuesday night, along with search dogs and medical supplies to help with rescue efforts. The team will continue their operation in Turkey until February 17th. The South Korean government said it plans to provide aid to Syria as well, once international organizations announce their humanitarian aid needs. Peunji, Arirang News.
Team Korea's rescue efforts are ongoing even at this moment. Now, people in Korea are also stepping up to send condolences as well as much-needed aid to Turkey. For instance, food for the hungry in Korea, an NGO to raise awareness of poverty and hunger around the world, raised over $7,800 just a day after the earthquake occurred. People and charities here in the country are also sending care packages and essential necessities like warm jackets for children. With the death toll continuing to rise, the Turkey-Syria quake is said to be one of the worst earthquakes of the 21st century. There was no surprise about North Korea's celebration of its Army Founding Day. The military parade did take place in Pyongyang on Wednesday night with fireworks and jet flyovers. As usual, the North showed off its newest weapons and also a relatively new face. Here are the details.
North Korea's largest ever military parade was yet another message of defiance against denuclearization, with the regime's newest missiles on display and the next generation of the ruling Kim family attending the nighttime event. State media Korean Central News Agency on Thursday released images of the regime's 75th Army founding anniversary, which kicked off the night before. Among the array of weaponry moving across Kim Il-sung Square, official photos and satellite imagery showed what appeared to be 11 Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missiles. The Hwasong-17 is reportedly the largest road-mobile liquid-fueled ICBM in the world and is capable of reaching the United States mainland. The ICBM was largely expected to appear in the parade, and international observers speculate the North is working on upgrading the missile with a solid-fuel engine, which offers a more stable and rapid liftoff. But what stalled the show were the large missile canisters atop 5 new 18-wheel launch vehicles. They're believed to contain new solid-engine ICBMs under development.
And those canisterized ICBMs, those are probably just, for the moment, prototypes. They're probably not anywhere near deployable, and maybe probably not even operational. But they're showing the direction that they're going in, and given the fact that we are relatively certain that North Korea's had at least 2 and possibly even more solid fuel static engine tests, that they are moving towards accomplishing their task at some point.
In addition to quantitative progress in its missile technology, the expert says the sheer number of missiles displayed at the parade sends a message to the United States.
The number of ICBMs indicates that North Korea is trying to show the United States that missile defense is a losing bet, that it will always be possible, or most of the time will be possible, for North Korea to build ICBMs faster and cheaper than the United States can build interceptors as a part of the missile defense network for the homeland United States.
Another surprising factor was the attendance of Kim Jong-un's young daughter Kim Joo-ae, reported by state media. Experts say her presence reinforces the message that Pyongyang sees its nuclear prowess as the future for its younger generation, hinting that it will not be scrapping its nuclear weapons program. An estimated 22,000 people were mobilized at the milestone event, marking it the largest parade the regime has ever held. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
We all knew the military parade was coming, but there was no message or speech delivered directly by the leader Kim Jong-un. Instead, there were interesting details spotted. Let's turn to our defense affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young for more insight into the occasion. Welcome, Soo-young.
Great to be here, Tammy.
So before we get to the technical aspects, the military parade on Wednesday night was the largest ever edition.
It certainly was. Around 22,000 people projected by some army sources. And well, actually, South Korean military authorities believe it could have been up to 30,000 if you count all the personnel there. And as much as this was North Korea's 75th anniversary of its army, the regime tends to go really big on these milestone years, ending with 5s and 0s, and they wanted to make this one stand out, particularly given that this week also marked the 60th anniversary of the army's slogan, declared by leader Kim Jong-un's grandfather and, of course, regime founder Kim Il-sung.
Right, a match for 100.
That's right, and what this means is that one North Korean troop should be enough to take out 100 of the enemy, and state media, they really reinforced this message in the days running up to the February 8th parade. And Kim Jong-un reportedly ordered his military to increase their war preparedness, and the parade was also intended to show their, quote, war deterrence and counter-strike capabilities.
Right. Now, speaking of the weaponry displayed at the military parade, it seems that many were looking out for improvement in missile development, particularly when it comes to the engine.
Exactly, you're very right, Tammy. So particularly when it comes to North Korea's largest missile developed so far, the Hwasong-17, that runs on liquid fuel engines. And when it comes to military use, though, solid fuel is preferred as it's less likely to explode and it can be stored much more easily too, without requiring as much space as liquid fuel does. And so you could say that solid fuel engines would make it safer, quicker, and of course easier to prepare for launching very quickly. They're also easier to hide in land mobile deployments. And the North has been trying to develop solid engine ICBMs as part of its 5-year plan on strengthening national defence, along with hypersonic missiles, submarine launched ballistic missiles, satellites and reconnaissance drones, of course. They claim to have successfully tested a solid fuel engine in December, and we saw what are presumed to be new ICBMs with solid fuel engines, but then again, the question is whether we can really take their word for it.
Exactly. There have always been questions as to the weapons at the military parade can be used.
Right, so it's a completely different question whether or not they're deployable or not, whether they're operational or not, and that's exactly why experts say we shouldn't naturally just assume that they're automatically deployable. You have to remember that the parade is all about the optics and creating a buzz. And well, here's what Professor Kim Young-gyu at the East Asia Institute had to say.
If it is a solid fuel missile, this is going to be a real big change, because that means that we will have less time to detect the missile. We'll have less time to think about our countermeasures if they are actually targeting something. Because if it is solid fuel missiles, they can just prepare for it and just launch it anytime they want. So that if that is the real solid fuel missiles, it's going to be really big change. And I've heard it, many experts saying that if this Hwasong-17 missile have the MIRV, like multiple independently targetable reentry vehicle, with more than dozens of missiles of them, which that can actually surpass the U.S. missile defense system. But what I would just want to say that this is a parade. It's not a test. They have not demonstrated these missiles are operational.
Now, going back to your report, you said in your report that the parade was delivering a message to the U.S. Now, what message did it have for the domestic audience, Dan?
A false display of bravado, I would say. Really a plea for unity as the regime deals with a flailing economy, which was bad enough already before it started shrinking after the COVID-19 pandemic, with 2 straight years of decline in 2020 and 2021. Kim Jong-un himself has admitted the North's failure to reach economic goals, and we're even hearing reports of worsening food insecurity towards the country too. We've seen over the past years that the tougher things are internally, the more the regime tends to lash out. And that's possibly why we saw the regime fire a record number of missiles, over 70 last year in 2022. And they're very likely to launch more provocations this year, though perhaps through less costly means such as drones and cyber warfare. There's not really much to be optimistic about for the North Korean economy going ahead. So Kim Jong-un really needs to rally his people around the flag. And that's exactly what these parades are meant to do. They're supposed to reinforce national pride, unity, and really make people believe they're enduring hardship to fight against an external enemy.
Right. And just to add on, another interesting spot at the military parade was the attendance of the leader's daughter, Kim Ju-ae. She's been quite visible on state media in the past few days.
Yeah, she certainly has. She's believed to be around 9 or 10 years old. And well, it's very interesting to see pictures of Kim Jong-un's daughter turning up at these state events hand in hand with her father. And she appeared in the public eye last November for the first time. And the military parade on Wednesday night was her 5th media appearance. And you can actually see from the state media that her status has been elevated from being described as Kim's beloved daughter to something like esteemed child. And she's also walking next to her father in these photos, sitting right next to him and conversing very freely. And this bears great contrast to her mother, who is walking slightly behind them. So you can see that the spotlight on this child is quite intentional.
Right. Kim, father and daughter seem quite intimate. Now, some people are saying that she may be his successor. Is that theory gaining force after the military parade? What do you think?
Well, honestly, I would say it's much too early to tell because, well, I have seen the international press coverage on this. They were all over the sighting of this girl at the parade. And I too, of course, found it fascinating. It's unprecedented. But we have to remember that she's only about 9 or 10 years old. And her father, Kim Jong-un, is only 39. So, yes, there are definitely theories about his health as well as, whether he's okay or not. But in practical terms, it's going to be very difficult to really imagine her leading this very highly conservative and patriarchal regime even if he dies in the next few years or even in 10 years' time. I mean, never say never, but also at this point, it is much too early to be making any meaningful predictions, I would say. And it's probably more productive to think about the more immediate goals that the regime might have in really placing her under the spotlight right now. So this is what Professor Kim has to say.
It's like a European-style monarchy, and Kim Joo-hae is girl, is not a boy, and I think they're intentionally treating her like a princess, like by higher-ranking, military leaders or by Kim Jong-un himself, wearing nice dress, so on and so on, and it's just trying to show the image that they are not villains. So I think what Kim Jong-un really wants to send the message through, portraying her, his daughter, is that they are not really the bad guys, and also what they are doing is for the future generation to come, and because of that, they will never give up nuclear weapons, or they can never give up, developing missile programs.
All right, this is where we'll have to wrap things up. Thank you so much for coming in today, Suyang.
Pleasure to be here, Tammy.
Shifting gears, South Korea is becoming greener at home and abroad. Let's begin with electric vehicles.
Despite the global economic slowdown, sales of electric vehicles were strong enough to take up about 10% of all new cars sold globally in 2022. According to data released by auto industry researchers LMC Automotive, global sales reached 7.8 million units, showing an impressive on-year increase of 68%. This was mainly due to solid growth in China and Europe. Data released by South Korea's Transport Ministry shows that the country closely matches the global trend with a total of 390,000 registered EVs, up 68.4% from the previous year, while registration of gasoline cars only rose by 2.6%. With a growing preference for eco-friendly spending, sales of electric cars are expected to increase. For this year, about 12.8 million new electric vehicles are expected to be registered worldwide, taking up 16% of all newly registered vehicles. For South Korea, demand in 2023 is expected to hit 200,000 vehicles. But having the right infrastructure is crucial.
In South Korea, there's one charging point for every 2.6 electric vehicles. And that's far better than one charger per 7.2 vehicles in China or 15.5 EVs in Europe. However, further development of EV infrastructure is still needed for the country to boost its electric car market.
Because Koreans tend to prefer a fast-paced lifestyle, EV owners want fast chargers. The government will continue to expand the supply, and private firms are already entering this charging business. This is expected to gradually ease any inconveniences.
There is still a lack of charging infrastructure and a high risk of fire that puts people off buying EVs. Using gas stations or public facilities by relaxing regulations could be a way to establish more charging points.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Environment Ministry announced reformed subsidies rules that it says will increase the supply of EV infrastructure and service centers. Full subsidies will be given to buyers of cars from automakers that operate customer service centers in Korea and an online service data management system. The government has also raised the price ceiling of EV subsidies by 2 million Korean won, or roughly $1,600. As a result, vehicles under 57 million won, or around $45,000, will be able to receive the full subsidy. 신하영, Arirang News.
The latest data indicates South Korea's growing EV market is being acknowledged globally. For instance, Hyundai's Ioniq 5 this week was named the 2023 Best Electric Vehicle by Cars.com, beating out a long list of EVs that have been released into the market. And it's not just the automobile industry that are turning more green. Local retail industries are introducing products that have been recycled already. Let's take a look.
Bringing spent resources back to life. It's part of the so-called circular economy, one of South Korea's main areas of focus this year. This concept is different from a linear economy, which is a process of using resources, creating a product, and disposing of it after use. A circular economy gives a product greater value by sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, or recycling it rather than simply trying to reduce waste. This kind of system is helpful for achieving the target of net zero, as the Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute say more than 9 billion tons of carbon dioxide can be cut by 2050 through a circular economy. One global information technology services and consulting company also reported $4.5 trillion worth of economic value could be created by 2030 if a circular economy is adopted. Now, retail industries are putting it into action. I'm wearing McDonald's new uniform. What's special about this jacket? It has filling made out of this recycled plastic lids. From the start of February, employees have been wearing eco-friendly uniforms. The fabric is made from recycled plastic bottles, while McDonald's lids are transformed into recycled thermal fillers.
We've been trying to reduce plastic by adopting strawless lids for the first time in the industry. The eco-friendly jacket, too, is one of our activities to support the circular economy in society.
One major retailer, too, sells bags that are made from recycled plastic banners, which had already been made from recycled plastic bottles. It takes 10 plastic bottles to make 1 square meter of banner, which cuts 354 grams of carbon dioxide compared to not using recycled materials. One expert says in order to make society more circular, goals should be more specific.
The government's goal is still vague. Instead of forcing companies to increase the use of recycled resources to 30% by 2030, they should specify what kind of resources should be used for what. This can lead to a practical investment for companies.
He added individual consumers, too, should question why waste occurs in the process of consumption. By asking these questions and finding solutions, he said it could also contribute to making society go zero waste. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Now for a COVID-19 update. 2 full weeks have passed since South Korea dropped the indoor mask mandate, and figures indicate the country is doing okay. Before we talk more about the COVID-19 situation here in the country, let's first turn to our Jung Eun-ju.
South Korea's overall downward trend in new COVID-19 infections continues despite the country lifting most of its virus curves. The government lifted the mask mandate for indoor spaces, except at hospitals, pharmacies, and on public transportation on January 30th. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said at Wednesday's briefing that the number of new cases last week decreased by 24% compared to the previous week. The agency attributed the decline to the high level of voluntary adherence to COVID-19 preventive measures. The country also added fewer than 20,000 new cases for the 7th straight day. There were 22 COVID-19 related deaths, and the number of critically ill patients was down 10 from the previous day to 283. The nation's COVID-19 reproduction index is at 0.90, below 1 for 5 consecutive weeks, indicating that the spread of the virus has decreased. Weekly COVID-19 risk levels were also at low nationwide for the first week of February. Presumed cases of reinfection, however, slightly increased from 22.8% to 23.03% in the last week of January. This means that 1 in 4 to 5 confirmed cases had already caught the virus before. Health officials said that the immunity of those who were infected during the spread of the Omicron variant may be decreasing and urged people to get booster shots. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
It looks like the country has the spread of the virus under control, at least for now, thanks to many people sticking to virus prevention measures. More hopeful comments came out this week. The commissioner of the Korean Disease Control and Prevention Agency, Chi Young-mi, told reporters earlier on Tuesday that 2023 will be the start of the transition back to normal life. Now, speaking of a full return to normal, she said the country will wait for the World Health Organization's call on removing the global health emergency label. The WHO will hold its next meeting in late April. Next up, K-pop stars in the spotlight. Korean boy band Tomorrow by Together, or better known as Tubatu, has made it #1 on the Billboard 200 albums chart. That makes them the 5th South Korean artist to top the chart artist after groups BTS, Super M, Stray Kids, and Blackpink. The album is called the name chapter Temptation. And success is not just limited to Billboard charts. One song from the album, Sugar Rush Ride, has racked up more than 64 million views on YouTube since its release at the end of last month. And K-pop girl group Red Velvet will be headed to Spain this summer to perform at the Primavera Sound, one of the largest music festivals in the world. They'll be the only K-pop group to be performing at the 22-year-old festival this year. The festival will be held in 2 locations in Spain this year, with Red Velvet taking the stage on June 1st in Barcelona and June 8th in Madrid. This year's lineup includes headliners Blur, Kendrick Lamar, and Halsey. That is all we have for this week's Weekly News Highlights. Have a lovely weekend.